So I'm here to talk about Firebase for games. And I guess the first place to start with this is Firebase. What is Firebase? Does anyone know? Has anyone heard of Firebase before? I've heard of Firebase. Okay, there's perhaps half the room's heard of Firebase before. So what is Firebase? Firebase is a suite of integrated products designed to help you develop your app, grow a user base, and earn money. Right, does that make sense to everyone? All right, well, let's dig in. What does that mean? So we've got a whole suite of different products. And the idea is that you can pick and choose, mix and match the products that you want to use within your application. And these products are bucketed into different groups that enable you to help speed up the development of your application, grow the user base of your application, or earn money from your application. So that's all good stuff, right? So for example, we have the remote config product, and this enables you to deploy an application, then perform A/B testing without redeploying a new version of the application. Very, very useful. We have cloud messaging and notifications. So this you can use to re-engage users, try and bring them back into your application. Very relevant for game developers. App invites and dynamic links. So these products, when they're working together, can enable you to potentially organically grow your application, reward users. There's a whole host of different things that you can do with these. And then finally, when you want to actually earn some money, we have AdMob that you can use to advertise in your applications and try and earn some money from that. And then in terms of trying to measure the effectiveness of all of these different features in your app, or how well your app is doing in general, we have analytics that ties everything together. And this is integrated into all of the Firebase products. So you get a lot of implicit signals when you're using any one of these features. Okay, so games. Who plays games in here? Almost everyone, Who develops games? Oh my God, it's game developer audience. Okay, you guys might find this boring, but for the people who are watching the video, let's go into it. So 49% of American adults play games according to Pew Research. That's a pretty big audience, so it might be worth getting into the business. It generates about 10 to 15% of YouTube views at the moment are associated with gaming in some way. That's pretty massive, again, in terms of audience. VR is a massive market that's growing, right? It's the next big thing. Everyone wants to get in there. It's very sexy, very interesting. And then there's also just, developing games can be joyful, can be fantastically fun. After you suffer a lot of pain of grueling hours and all of that sort of stuff of actually trying to build the game in the first place. So it's a pretty attractive industry to get into. If you're not already a game developer, I'd highly recommend it as a career path. Okay, so you're all sold on that now, right? You want to go out and build a game. So how do you go out and build a game? Well, you've got to think about, you've got to come up with an idea. So idea requires research. Research involves playing games. You're all playing games, so that's great. We've got that, right? And then the other thing is that you have to figure out how to build the game, right? There's a whole host of different technologies out there to build the game. And so, you've got to choose one that enables you to reach the audience that you're interested in. If you just think about just iOS and Android, there's a potential audience out there of 1.5 billion users that you could get to play your game. So how do you reach those? They're two different operating systems, right? That sounds like it's going to be really hard. Well, actually, there's some old language that a lot of people still use that is actually cross-platform, and you could use to target both iOS and Android. And this is C++. So C++ is a great language to use. You can build really, really performant games, and you can also compile for both iOS and Android. So that's fantastic, right? That's great. There's also a whole host of middleware out there that you could use to build your game. So I've got a couple of pieces on the slide here. You've got Cocos 2DX on one hand. If you want to build a simple 2D game, they've got a platform abstraction layer. They have tools to author content. They have ways for deployment. Really, really cool. Really easy to get started with. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we've got Unreal that enables you to build really big AAA titles. Really fantastic stuff, but at the cost of higher complexity. So there's plenty, and there's a whole ton of other middleware out there. Just have a look on Wikipedia. There's a ton of stuff available for you to use. The other option is you could roll your own engine. The advantage of doing this is that you can really optimize for your use case, at the expense of having to build all of the technology yourself, or even pick and choose piece of technology. So here we've got a screenshot of Pioneer that was built by our team at Google. We built all of the different pieces, and the advantage of it was that in the end we ended up understanding the entire stack, and we could really optimize for our use case. So, right, you can go out, build in C++, cross-platform, great. We want to target multiple platforms. And we're going to use C++ because we know that we can compile our application, C++ application for both Android and iOS. That's great. But all of the platform APIs and all of the SDKs that you see, like, for example, like Firebase, things like that, they're typically written for app developers who are targeting the languages, the first-party languages for those platforms. So it's like Objective-C or Swift for iOS, or on Android it's Java. All right? So, well, we can work around this. Let's see what that looks like. So, if I was to just try and retrieve a link from an application that's just starting up in Android, it's 3 lines of code. It's super easy, right? So I can find out which URL opened up my app. Right, the first line, I'm getting the intent, the data that was passed to my application to figure out what happened. I get the action from it, which tells me whether someone was trying to view some data in my app or something like that. And then finally the data, which is the URL. So what happens when I try and do this in C++? Well, I've got to do all this horrible JNI. There's a bit of reflection in there as well. So this is the first set of code. I've then got to call a method to retrieve the string. This is the action string. And then if I've got an action string, I'll go and retrieve the array from it. And after I've retrieved an array, I've got to copy it. And then I've got to clean up a load of stuff. And on it goes. All right. So what you're probably wondering right now, why am I talking about C++? It just sounds like a real pain, right? And especially when you're talking about APIs that target, just iOS or Android, and they're written on Objective-C or Java. Well, we thought about this, right? And we built a C++ interface for Firebase. So you don't have to do all of that crazy stuff to use our API. You just, include our libraries, you add all the appropriate dependencies, and off you go. You can write some simple code. So that's great. I'm ready to build a game now. So now I'm ready to build a game. So what I'd usually do, to try and get some inspiration, I'd have a cup of tea. I'm English, I like tea. Perhaps get some biscuits, dunk some biscuits, or cookies as you like to call them here. And I'm sitting there drinking my tea, having my cookies. I know what I can do. I can make a game about cookies. That's going to be really cool. It's going to be super easy, right? So I come up with Cookie Tap. Oh, you've never heard of anything like this before, surely, right? So what do you do in this game, right? You tap the cookie, you earn points, and you impress your friends by going, look how many cookies I have. Great game, right? So this is the code for my game. I've written it in a library called Flat UI in conjunction with FPL Base. They're open source. So basically all this does is, for each frame until the game exits, it renders a label that says cookies, converts the score to a string, renders that in the top right corner, and then displays a cookie. And when the cookie button's tapped on, so where it says, event up, it increments the score. So then it will display an increase in score. Cool, I've done my game. That was it. Awesome. I publish it to the Play Store, for example, and I'm seeing some installs. I can see it in the Play Store. That's great. Okay, so then I go and sit down. I have another cup of tea. And then, I realize, well, okay, I've got my game out there. How do I make any money out of this? No one is going to pay to download my cookie tapping app, even though it's obviously the most awesome game out there, right? They're not going to pay for just tapping a cookie. So perhaps I could earn some money through some advertising. So what do we need to do? So the first thing we need to do is just initialize Firebase. It's pretty much one line of code. There's some conditional code in there for Android because Android is Android. And then after I've initialized Firebase, I then initialize the AdMob API, create a banner view, wait for it to start up, load an ad, wait for the ad to load, and then finally show the banner. That was it, right? How many lines of code is that? How hard is that? So easy. So now I've unlocked advertising. Great, excellent, right? Apart from not seeing any money coming in, that's not very cool. I might have to just live on tea and no cookies soon. So, you know, I know people are installing the game, but I don't know how big my audience really is, right? So how do I figure that out? Well, you know, as I mentioned before, Firebase has an analytics product. Maybe I could use that. One line of code, I just initialize the analytics API, and I'm done. I've enabled analytics. That was it. That was the very lowest bar that I could do. You know, I could do a lot more, but I'm just too lazy. I want another cup of tea. So I go back, and I've enabled analytics. So now from that, I can figure out how many people have opened the game, where the game install came from, whether it was an install from the Play Store, whether it was an organic install from the web, and whether people are returning to play. Like how good is my retention for this game? How long are people playing it? So that's really cool. So I look at the Firebase console, and I'm losing cookie tappers. People just they play the game initially and then they're off. You know, they don't want to play it anymore, right? So how can I improve this? Well, I end up talking to a few of my friends, some of them back there in the corner of the room, and they tell me we don't have enough cookie. We want more cookie. So I'm like, well, I interpret that as obviously we need a bigger cookie, right? That's what I need to do. So what I can do is I could run a test. Right, so I'm going to use remote config for this. So I initialize the API. I set the default cookie size to what I had before, which is this magic number 300. I fetch my remote config, my remote configuration, and then I get the cookie size from the remote configuration. Now, if I've done nothing, this will be exactly the same as before. And also, right at the end there, I'm logging the size of the cookie that is being displayed to users. Right, so this is all I do. So I do add this to my app, I redeploy my game, and now I'm going to be able to remotely configure my cookie size. And then, from the Firebase console, I can go into the remote config panel, and I can set my big cookie parameter in there. Right, so I've now got a small regular size cookie is size 300, and a big cookie is size 400. And then what I'm going to do is target that big cookie at around about half of my audience. I'm saying about 49% of my audience. So, you know, people, like half of my players will get a big cookie and about half the players will get the regular size cookie. And because I'm looking the cookie size, I should be able to see which players are seeing which size cookie. Finally, so, you know, here I'm creating the cookie size, and what I do here is I associate the cookie size that I'm logging with an audience in Firebase Analytics. So I have these two groups of users that I can then segment my reports by. Okay, great. So now I've got a big cookie in my game without updating it. So I could you know, try other cookie sizes if I wanted without redeploying the app. You know, I could also measure the impact of the cookie size through the Firebase Analytics console as well. So let's go and have a look at that. So I look at my regular cookie, I'm still losing users. People don't like the normal size cookie. And then when I look at the big cookie, people like the big cookie. Big cookie's a hit. So if I know the big cookie's a hit, finally, I'll just set the default size to the big size and my experiment is done. Right? And I can just leave that code in my app if I wanted to change it later. Okay, so now I want to figure out how to increase my audience size. So I could use my cookie clickers, right? I could use the people who are to share the app with their friends. So I can add app invites to my cookie tapping application. So here I create a sender, which is a way to send an invite to their friends, to people's friends. I've added a button, which is a share button. When the button is tapped, I'm creating a send message. The title is cookie tap. I'm tapping a cookie. And then, you know, the link into my app, which tells me where that came from, right? So it's got this share link. And then finally, I send the invite. And what this will do is when a user taps on that link, that will then it will open up a dialog that will enable them to share the application with their friends. They can select the friends that they want to share with. And when their friends click on that link, it will install and open the application with that link associated with it. So here we go, here's my share button. It's really pretty. And then, you know, as I said, when people open up the app, they can press that share button and it will create a dynamic link that installs and opens the app. And then I could take actions on that link potentially. Like I could say, when someone opens that link, perhaps they get a rainbow cookie or a cookie with milk or something like that. Okay, so then I look at my analytics dashboard. Did that make a difference? Well, I see that it resulted in some more users, which is great. More users means more eyes means more people potentially clicking on ads. More ads means more cookies for me, so I can dunk them in my tea. But I'm seeing low retention. People come and tap my cookie for like perhaps a week, and then they're done, right? They're fed up with the game, or perhaps they just forget about the game. There's so many different things out there vying for your attention. So what I could do is try and bring them back into the app. And so for here, I'll use Firebase Cloud Messaging. So what I do is, in my app, I create a listener, which waits for messages to be sent to the application. So here, when it receives a message, it retrieves some data from the message called a reward. And this could be an arbitrary string. You could do whatever you want here. And from that reward, I end up converting the value of that reward to a number, and that's my message open award. Right? So what I end up doing in my game loop is I initialize the messaging API, with my listener that I created, and every time they tap a cookie now, they get an additional reward for the session that they opened up that message. Right? So I can then go to the Firebase notifications console. Well, I could do it, or I could ask my mum to do it because it's super easy, right? All you have to do is click in and fill in a few fields. You could send, I've authored a message here. The message is more cookies per click available right now. The label is extra cookies, so that's what would show up in the little notification bar on Android or iOS. And then I schedule a time to send this out to my users. And what I'm going to do in this particular experiment is just send it out to Android users. And then finally, if someone clicks on this message and open the app, they'll get an extra 5 cookies per click. More cookies is great, right? So I take a look at the impact of that, and now people are actually coming back to the application because they get more cookies. Fantastic. So what's next? What should you do? So I recommend, if you're a C++ developer, to go and check out our documentation. Also check out the rest of Firebase, and you can also come to our support portal and join the conversation. Okay, thank you very much.